three. Well, today we've got some special lady here today. It's Mrs. Nicholson. And she was a little girl, or a young lady in World War II. Now, this is my mother-in-law, so that's why we've got the same name. But let's find out what it was like to be a child during World War II. Hello.
Hello.
Thank
nice
you
to
so
see you.
much for this. This is so kind of you.
It's a pleasure.
We've had lots of questions from our children.
Yes.
And one of the things they wanted to know was whereabouts did you live and how old were you during the World War II?
I was 10 when the war broke out, and I lived in Barnard Castle in County Durham, which is a market town. So it was a lot smaller than Droitwich, a bit like Ulster, I suppose.
Oh.
Yes,
And that's quite a way up north, isn't it?
Yes, it's about 200 miles away.
So perhaps you could have a look on a map of England and see if you can find it. That would be
It
good.
has been in the news over COVID because the health minister took himself up to Barnard Castle.
Yeah, so it has got a notorious bit as well.
And funnily enough, where he stayed was the Scarlet Fever hospital, which I was in the year before war broke out for 6 weeks.
Oh, so people have been poorly for a long time. One of the questions asked was, did you have any technology?
None at all. We had a wireless. We had no
A wireless? Excuse me, what's a wireless?
Radio.
Oh, a radio.
A radio then was about as big as a television.
Oh my goodness.
We had a radio. We had no telephone. No telephone at all. Not private telephone. No house phone.
Oh my goodness. So that would have been difficult getting information.
And we didn't have a phone till 1952.
Goodness me. And some of you children have got your own, so think how difficult it was.
It was. You had to write to somebody or send them a telegram. And to send them a telegram was you had to go into the post office, write on a piece of paper. They phoned it through to wherever it had to go. And then a little boy on a bike used to bring it to your house.
Oh my goodness.
So that was a telegram. That was the quickest way of getting in touch with people.
Did you listen to the radio that was going on during the war?
Yes, I used to listen to Children's Hour.
Huh?
Larry the Lamb.
Larry the Lamb on Children's Hour. I don't know, we'll have to see if we can find some of that to have a look at.
Yes, and I used to listen to Glenn Miller and those sort of bands.
Did your parents let you listen to what was happening during the war? Or did they try and keep that away?
No, they didn't try and keep it away, and obviously the news was always 6 o'clock at night, and we were probably just finishing tea, so I would hear it anyway.
Did you ever feel afraid?
No, I never felt afraid. But then I lived out, it was a country place, we didn't have any bombs.
Ah.
So I was very lucky. My husband felt afraid because he lived in a big town. But I didn't feel afraid at all, no. I had a lovely war, actually.
Now, this is something that we've been learning a lot about, is children that were evacuees. Now, your place sounds like a brilliant place to send evacuees. Did you have any in your area?
Yes, we did. We had a girl, Pat Harris, they called her, and she stayed with a family over the road. I had Margaret Harrison, who did live in Droitwich, and she stayed with a family down the road. And I had Elizabeth, she stayed with some friends of mine. And a lot of children came with their parents, came with their mother. Perhaps their father was fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So the mother would take them to the nearest relations.
Oh,
So they would come to our town and stay. And so I got to know those children as well. And we just took them into our gang.
So you were playing with them all the time then?
Yes, they just came part. We just took them as though they were ours.
A bit like we do when we have new children at school. We just take them in as part of our little family, don't we?
Yes.
So that'd be just the same.
Especially if they were the same age as us. They
Yes.
just came and joined in. And if you think about it, we didn't have any toys.
So what did you play with?
Probably an empty baked bean tin. somebody would throw it,
Yes.
and the person that was on had to wait till that landed, and then he had to go and collect the bean tin, take it back. Then he was allowed to go and find the people that had hidden. So it was hide and seek, but it was called Tin Can Hidey.
Oh, there's a game. We could perhaps play that at school, but with a beanbag. That might be a good idea.
That and skipping ropes and hopscotch and all those sort of things.
I remember you telling me one day that one of your favourite toys was some roller skates.
Yes, roller skates, yes. I skated everywhere. Roller skated everywhere. It used to get into trouble. If you skated down the town, there was one shop, if you passed that, they came out and said, "Don't you roller skate past my shop." Yes, roller skates, hopscotch, skipping. We had some houses that had been started to be built down the road, and of course they couldn't be finished during the war.
Mm-hmm.
So there was big planks and there was all sorts of things. So we played on the buildings.
Ah, no. You wouldn't be allowed to do that now, would you?
So
it'd
we'd
be very
make
unsafe.
seesaws with the big planks. Because if you think about it, there was no play areas.
No, you didn't have
We
them,
didn't
did
have
you?
play areas in those days. Children weren't catered for like they are now. And so there was no play areas, so you had to make your own play area, which we did.
Bit like our make, do and mend, make your own
Yes,
toys.
it was. It was all make, do and mend during the war. Everything was make, do and mend during the war.
Who made your clothes?
My mother, sometimes out of hers. Sometimes she'd make me a skirt out of an old skirt of hers. And then when I was about 14, I made my own from then on.
Oh, so that was something we talked about the other day, isn't it?
And
we talked about food as well, rationing. What did you miss the most, do you think?
Chocolate.
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 Chocolate. Did you have sweets?
2 ounces of chocolate a month, I think, was the ration.
Oh my goodness, that's not even a mouthful.
No, and my father gave me his ration.
Oh.
So I had four bars of chocolate a week.
What was your favourite meal that you had during rationing?
Probably something like sausage pie, which was sausages cooked, then a tin of tomatoes put on the top, and then potato put on the top, and then if there was any cheese left, if we had a bit of cheese on a rind, we would have a bit of cheese on the top.
That's true. You had to use what you had, and sometimes if you hadn't got it, you couldn't get any more until the next week.
Next month.
Oh, the next month. Oh my goodness, that's even worse.
Sausages weren't like sausages are now. They were more bread and fat than they were meat.
They don't sound very appetising.
No, they
to me.
weren't. But I mean, you had to get used to these things.
Yes,
if
you
you
did.
couldn't have anything else.
And what about growing your own stuff? Did you grow your own
Yeah, my
stuff?
father had an allotment, so he grew all sorts of veggies, and he grew raspberries and strawberries.
Oh, so you
and
would
black
have something
currants.
sweet as well.
Yes, and my mum used to swap a pound of Dad's raspberries with the greengrocer for a pound of sugar, so she could make some jam.
Ah, oh, that's a clever idea.
Mm.
So there are ways of doing things even then.
Well, yeah, I think a bit like COVID, everybody had to pull together.
Mm.
You couldn't be selfish. You just had to getting on with people and helping each other and sharing. Yes, definitely.
Now you told me that you had some soldiers billeted at your house.
We did, yes. In 1939, when the soldiers were first being conscripted, they had nowhere to go. There was no army camps.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were building 5 army camps around Barnard Castle. And so while the soldiers were training, they had to be billeted on people.
Oh, right, okay.
And anybody that had a spare bedroom got a couple of soldiers. So we had 2 South Wales borderers billeted on us. They were only young, when I think about it. They were probably only 17.
So they were still quite young.
Still
even
quite
then.
young, yes. At night I used to play darts with them in the kitchen. Well, dining room. Yes. And I suppose we had them for about 6 or 8 months.
Oh my goodness.
But my mother didn't have to feed them. They were fed in tents where the camps were going
Oh right,
to be.
yes.
So she didn't have to feed them at all. But of course they slept at our house and yes.
Now, your dad worked in a bank.
Yes.
And he was a bit older, so he did something that he was an ARP.
He was an ARP, which is an air raid warden.
Oh.
So what he did at night, as soon as it got dark, he would go round certain streets. Each warden had a section of streets.
Oh right, yes.
And he would go round certain streets to see that nobody had left any lights on or hadn't drawn their blackout curtains.
Oh, yes,
So-
we've been learning about the blackout.
And so if you think about it now, if you went out at night now, everywhere would be lit up. There'd be street lighting. There was no street lighting at all, and there was no light from anybody's house either. So if you went out at night, it was literally pitch black unless there was a moon.
Not so sure I'd want to go out in that.
You didn't, unless it was necessary.
No, I suppose you didn't.
You didn't. I suppose as I got to be 14 or 15 and I became a member of the Operatic Society, so I used to go to rehearsals and things. But, you know, your father always came and met you and took you there because it was so
just
dark.
so dark.
Yes. And we'd
Goodness
have
me.
a little torch that was slit so that it only showed a tiny little bit of light.
Just enough to see where you're putting your
Yes.
feet. Not very pleasant.
Yeah, but you got used to it. It was just something that happened. I mean, we had it for 5 years, 6 years.
Yes.
We just got used to it.
Oh gosh. Now we've been looking at air raids. Now you lived in the country, so you were fairly lucky that you didn't have bombing going on or things. But did you ever hear? Did they ever have air raids sirens going off?
Oh yes, the sirens went off because the bombers would come over us to get to Newcastle.
Oh.
So so if there was bombers coming up the country and they were going to be anywhere near where we lived, the sirens would go off.
Oh my word.
So what we did then, we would either go under the dining room table or under the stairs. The cupboard under the stairs was always kept for us to go under.
So you didn't have an Anderson shelter? Or...
No.
Oh my goodness.
My auntie had one in Darlington. She had an and it was horrible. We used to
they
play
were
in
cold
it.
and
Cold, and they're corrugated iron, and then soil built up on them. And I mean, they sometimes slept in it because they were much more vulnerable than we were.
Yes.
But yes, we had. I once saw, well, I just saw, Messerschmitt and the Spitfire having a fight over where we were picnicking. And as soon as the parents saw them, they sent us into a boathouse so we couldn't see. But they laid on the roof of the boathouse and watched it all. And also, a German plane crashed in Barnard Castle, in the hills in Barnard Castle. So we went up to get the shrapnel.
Oh.
We went and collected bits of it.
I'm sure your mum and dad have been really pleased to know you'd been scavenging bits of metal.
Bits of metal, yes. Well, everybody did, and you know who's got the biggest bit of metal.
So children, it wasn't all horrible for children, particularly those that were safe in the country. I think you sound like you had a bit of fun.
We did. We had a great time. I think we had a better time than children do now, because we were free.
Yes.
Completely free. We could go up the woods, play in the river, paddle. We used to dam the little streams and fiddle a little fish in, and played outdoors all the time.
Yes.
And there was not the fear of anybody running off with us or anything. Everybody just played
Everybody
outside.
knew everybody, didn't they?
Yeah,
Which
and
helped.
everybody just played outside unless it rained, and then you had to go into your house or somebody else's house to play.
When you went shopping with Mum, did you have to take your gas masks with you?
Wherever you went, you took your gas masks. If I went for a walk in the woods, I'd have to take my gas mask.
Oh,
If
so
I
even
went
when you're out
playing-
playing?
Yeah, We had our gas masks with us, unless we were just in the garden. But if we were anywhere distant, you had your gas mask.
You had to take
and
it.
Also your identity card,
Oh.
which was a little blue card. And in fact, I've looked to see if I could find mine, and I couldn't find it today. A little blue card that had your name and address on, and what was called your identity number. My identity number was FFAB 2023. And 3 was because I was the third person in the house.
Oh my goodness.
And that is so that, I mean, if a German came, he wouldn't have an English identity card.
Right.
So everybody had to always have their identity card and always have their gas masks.
Oh, well, I can't remember that in Spy Watch, but that might have been quite useful to know at that time, wouldn't it? When we watched the videos for that. We'll have to have a watch it again and see if they had identity cards, because that was something they missed.
And we had those. Well, I brought mine with me when I was married in 55. So, so we had them a long time.
Did you have a party at the end of the war?
We had a big bonfire. We obviously knew that things were getting better and that we were hoping the war would be over. And so we started to build a bonfire, probably in March or sometime like that, with any bits of stick or wood or anything we could find. And we built a very big bonfire, nearly as big as this room, I would think. And that was in this Barnard Castle School, boys' school grounds.
Yes.
And we all went, everybody went, just about the whole town went round this bonfire when we lit it. And we stuck potatoes in it and had roast potatoes and things like that. And that was the main party. Now, that was for VE Day, which was war over with Germany. But of course, the war wasn't over with Japan. So that didn't happen till the August. And I was actually camping up the river when I went up to the farm for the milk, and the chappie says, "'Twas over." Well, I didn't know what he'd said. Eventually I realised he was saying that the war was over completely, with Japan as well. And so I ran back down the hill, spilt all the milk, and we packed up our camp and we went back into Barnard Castle and had another big bonfire. So that was the E-Day. So that was the final day when war was completely over.
That must have been quite a day.
It was quite a day. I think the biggest day was with Germany, when war was over with Germany. But you must remember there was an awful lot of Englishmen that were in camps in Japan, which were horrible. And they were actually building railways and bridges. And
so it was very exciting.
No
to find
food at all. They were very ill when they came home. A friend of mine came home, Billy Bowman, and he was just a skeleton, and he was very, very ill for a long time.
So it was war was not nice for the people who had to fight it.
No, it was terrible. No, so yes, when it was over, and I think we had a party round at somebody's house who had a piano, and we all sang and played, and the men drank the beer, and I suppose we got a bit of lemonade. I can't remember. But yes.
Did you meet anybody that was evacuated? Have you met them since?
No, I haven't. Well, I suppose I met Elizabeth. We kept in touch with Elizabeth, so we were probably in our 20s.
Oh, right.
But she had been evacuated from Sunderland, which was probably 40 miles away.
Yeah.
And of course, if you remember, petrol was still rationed.
Oh yes, it was. It was
and
rationed for a long time.
Nobody had any cars. My father put his name down for a new car before the end of the war, and he didn't get it till about 1949.
So it was quite a long time,
even after
the war.
Even after the war, we
cars.
didn't have cars, and we certainly didn't have petrol. It was still rationed.
Oh my goodness!
I was married 55, and rationing had just finished a few months before I was married, and my mum gave me my ration card in case it came back again. That's in 1955.
That's a long time afterwards.
10 years after the end of the war.
So that was perhaps something that we hadn't thought about, that rationing went on for a long time, even after the war was over.
And scarcity. things were scarce.
I suppose getting them over to the UK wouldn't have been very easy during wartime, would it?
No, it wasn't, because the merchant ships, of course, were bombed and torpedoed by the Germans. So everything that came was lost. I mean, we didn't have oranges or bananas or we certainly didn't have anything like kiwi fruits or things like that. But we didn't have basic, like oranges, bananas and lemons and things like that we didn't have.
Oh my goodness.
So the only fruits you got were the apples and pears that were grown in England.
Yes.
And raspberries and strawberries when it was the season. And black currants. I think that was about it. I think Daddy grew red currants, but I didn't like those. Yeah.
So, I hope you've enjoyed our little chat and have learnt a little bit more about what it was like. Doesn't sound like it was too bad if you lived out in the country, and if you remember the Spy Watch videos, they seemed to have quite a nice time, didn't they? But I know that Dad had a pretty rotten time because he lived
in West Hartlepool, where it was shipbuilding and that sort of thing, and a port. And so they were bombed regularly.
And I know he had to go into air raid shelters quite regularly.
Yes, most of the time he slept in air raid shelters for quite a long time, yes.
That must have been absolutely terrifying for him.
And rationing was harder for them.
Yes. Well, they wouldn't have the places to grow, would they? Like you did in the country.
And apart from that, they didn't have friendly farmers that brought you half a dozen eggs or a bit of butter.
And do swapsies for fruit.
Yes, exactly. So he had definitely a much harder time than I did.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. And on behalf of Chawson, thank you so very much.
It's a pleasure.
It's a shame we can't do this in person like we did last year, but I hope it's given you a little idea of what it was like for somebody during World War II. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, and good luck to you all. Keep safe.
Bye.
Bye.